Okay, Algebra 1. This is Chapter 2, Notes, Solving and Graphing Inequalities. Our important vocabulary. An inequality is a statement where two expressions are not equal. This is where we use greater than or less than symbols. Our second important vocabulary is the solution of an inequality. This is a value of the variable that makes the inequality true. Our key ideas. When we're solving inequalities, it's very similar to solving equations. The only difference is, well, one of the differences is our equal sign is replaced with our less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to symbols. One of the things we need to remember is when you divide or multiply by a negative number, you must flip the inequality symbol, okay? Another thing that we do when we are solving inequalities is collect the variable to one side of the inequality. The key idea number 2 is graphing inequalities. We need to understand and remember that inequalities have lots of solutions, not just one, they have lots of solutions. When you graph an inequality, it is in an infinite amount of numbers, so we somehow need to be able to show that when we graph it. The way that we do that is we draw a line or shade to show all of them. Okay, when we do this, the first thing that we do is we circle the number where the solutions begin. Then, when we do that, we need to either close or shade in the circle if we're dealing with less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So we'll use a closed circle to show that. If we're dealing with less than or greater than and it's not equal to, then we will use an open circle. Take those lines off there so it doesn't look like less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. Then we will draw a line to represent the values of the solutions. Okay? So here we are with our first example. We have all of the variables on one side of the equation, so we don't need to worry about moving those. So we're just going to undo the addition that's with the x there in order to solve this. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. That gives us the inequality x is greater than or equal to 6. Because this is greater than or equal to, we are going to use a closed circle when we graph this. Okay, so let me put my numbers on my number line here. Let's see, it was 6, 7, 8, 9, and we'll make this 5, 4, 3. We are going to use a closed circle at 6, and then we need to read this. X is greater than or equal to 6. So we're going to look at all the numbers that are greater than or equal to 6. So we will shade in this direction. The next example, we have 5 is greater than 2n plus 7. We have all of the variables on one side, so let's go ahead and start undoing our operations in order to solve it. So put up our wall if we want to. We're going to subtract 7 from both sides. That gives me negative 2 is greater than 2n. Now we need to undo this multiplication that we have going on here. We're going to do that by dividing both sides by 2. That gives me negative 1 is greater than n. Okay? We did not flip the sign because we did not divide or multiply by a negative. Even though we have a negative on this side of the equation, we didn't multiply or divide by a negative, so we did not flip the sign. Okay, now here we have a situation where our n is on the right side, not the left side. So I like it better when my n, my variable, is on the left side of the equation because I read these solutions from left to right, just like I'm reading a book. So I'm going to flip this answer here so that it is in an order that's easy for me to read. So it's going to be n, and here it is pointing at the end, so I'm going to flip it, negative 1. Now these are the same solution. Okay, but this one is a little easier to graph. So here it says n is less than negative 1. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this. Let's see, negative 1. So I'm going to put an open circle because it's less than. And I know that I'm looking at the numbers that are less than -1, so I'm going to shade in this direction. The next example, we need to distribute. So we have -3n plus 12 is greater than -21. Our next step is to subtract 12 from both sides. That gives me -3n is greater than -33. Then I need to undo this multiplication, so I'm going to divide by -3. And that gives me n is going to be less than now because we divided by a negative. So we need to flip that sign. N is less than 11. So I go to put this on my number line here. I have less than is going to be an open circle, and it's going to be in that direction. Okay? And our last example, again, we can distribute. That gives me 8 is minus 6x is less than 4x minus 2. Now that we've gotten rid of those parentheses, we need to go ahead and get our x values, our variables, on the same side of the equation. So, notice they're on opposite sides of my wall here. So, I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Now, I could have added 6x to both sides. It doesn't really matter which way you decide to go. And that gives me 8 minus 10x is less than -2. Now I'm going to start to get that variable by itself. So subtract 8 from both sides gives me -10x is less than -10. And my last step is to divide by -10 on both sides. And that leaves me with x is now greater than, because I divided by a negative number, I had to flip that sign. And that gives me x is greater than a +1. So on my number line, I'm going to put it's greater than, so I'm going to put an open circle at 1, and it's going to be greater than or larger than, so I'm going to be going in this direction. Okay, there you go.